Hey guys, Skinnyboy here with another Malifaux battle report. This one's a little bit interesting and a little bit different this week because it is a 3-player game. So we had an extra player came down on our game night this week, and rather than him sitting out and just watching, we figured we'd give one of those 3-player scenarios a shot. So the strategy we're going to play is called Loot, but before I explain what that is about, I'll just define the terrain that we're going to be using. So all those fences that you see are height 1 soft cover. The forests are severe, blocking, and soft cover. We've got a swampy pool, which we're going to use as hazardous terrain. We've got 2 little tombstone markers, which are height 1 hard cover. And then we've got 2 larger pieces of terrain. So the one in the center of the board there, that's going to be a height 5 impassable terrain, which is blocking. Over on the left-hand side here, you can see another large rocky outcropping of terrain, which we also played as impassable, but that kind of courtyard area there, we played as open, and the fence that runs around the perimeter we used as height 1 soft cover, like a normal fence. So the loot strategy that we're playing is designed as a 3-player encounter. How it works is you set up with a 30mm treasure marker in the center of the table, which 2 players will fight over, and then there's a 3rd player who is deemed the wild card, and they will flip a card, and based on that they have to fulfill a different objective than the other 2. So you get 3 victory points if you pick up the treasure marker and hold it at the end of the game. It's a 2 AP action to pick that marker up. And you get an additional 1 victory point if the model carrying that marker or if the marker itself is in your deployment zone at the end of the game. So this scenario specifically uses corner deployment so that we all have space to set up our crews. Now, the wild card, he can get one of 4 things. He can try and kill our masters, he can try and take the loot marker for himself. While we're distracted fighting over the loot, he can try and drop ski markers in our deployment zones, or he can try and drop ski markers within 6 inches of the marker or the model carrying the marker, kind of like a spring the trap type situation. But we don't know what he's going to try and do. In addition to these kind of special scenario rules, we've got these 5 schemes. Convict labor as always, we've got take prisoner, we've got mark for death, covert breakthrough, and leave your mark. And the other thing that I want to mention is that we're just going to use 35 soulstone crews as opposed to the regular 50, just so it's a little bit quicker to get through with 3 people. So I declared my 10 thunders, and my two opponents have both declared Arcanists. So looking at these, looking at the strategy, the loot strategy, I want someone who's going to be able to get up to the loot marker, grab it, and either hold on to it or get it back out of the center of the table as quickly as possible. So I'm looking for someone with a bit of speed or something that's really, really tanky. Looking then at the rest of the schemes, I'm not really sure what I'm going to take. Nothing is hugely jumping out at me. I'm not a massive fan of convict labor. I find it quite difficult, except when we've got either a corner or flank deployment. I think with this diagonal center line, it's a lot easier, and the same kind of goes for leave your mark. That can be really difficult because you got to get 6 inches into the enemy deployment zone, but on a diagonal, there's a lot easier to do because you'll often find some of those really far-flung outflanking areas of the board are not actually really in play. Take prisoner is always kind of dependent on what my opponent takes, so we'll wait and see what their crew is like before I go ahead and choose that. Covert breakthrough, that's tough with corner deployment. That's the one you've got to get all the way across the board and dropping ski markers. It kind of plays in line a little bit with me wanting a speedy crew, but not so much in the fact that with the loot marker being in the center of the board, I don't really need to get over to my opponent's side of the table at all. Mark for death is a nice one. It's a tricky one, particularly because you've got to use an AP to mark them, and then you've got to use another AP or another couple AP usually to actually kill them. So it's a tag team between at least 2 models I've found. But I will choose them, and I will let you try and figure out what they are through the course of the game. So I went ahead with Mei Fang. On her, I took her Recall Training, Seismic Claws, and On Wings of Wind. That's kind of a standard build for me. I think it gives her a lot of utility. It makes her fast, and one turn she just goes ballistic with her recall training. I also like to take a fairly full Soulstone pool with May. So for this game I took 7. I usually use those for just burning tomes on her Tiger Claw attack, so she can Tiger Claw and then Jackhammer kick and really just do a lot of damage to a single opponent. Or if she finds herself in the thick of things, she can spread out a lot of hurt as well. So those souls are usually used for that tome trigger, also for damage prevention, just to keep her alive. She gets in the thick of things. Although she's usually able to get out of them again, particularly with her On Wings of Wind giving her a free push at the end of the turn, and her rail walking ability. Emberling, he's great. Incorporeal and significant means, and he's pretty fast, so he can get up into the middle of the board and grab me that loot marker. I've got the a rail worker. Those are, again, just really sturdy, solid models, and they're a jump point for May. Sensei Yu with the Wandering River style, so you can push stuff around, push them off the loot marker, or push my guys onto the loot marker, and hand out fast and slow. I've got a Tengu. Those guys are always great for scheme running. And I've got a Kamainu, which is, again, another fairly solid minion, and is a jump point for May's rail walking ability. So in terms of the strategy, what I see doing here is building a little railway of jump points up to the loot marker. May can swing in. She can dish out some damage. She can even push people around. Same with Sensei Yu. Grab the marker and then railroad out again. It's not going to work out exactly like that, and you'll see why later. But that was the original plan going into it. My opponent, who is the wild card, so we don't really know what he's doing, he went with Ironsides. And a fairly elite crew, I think. So he's got Ironsides with a couple upgrades. He's got Johanna with imbued energies. He's got a Firestarter with imbued energies. And he's got the 2 gunsmiths. And if you're wondering about those face-down upgrades, one of those models, Johanna, the Firestarter, or Ironsides, has the kill switch upgrade. And the other 2 have decoys. And then the other Arcanist player, who's going to be fighting with me over that loot marker, he went ahead with Rasputina. So he's got Raspy, he's got an Ice Golem with imbued energies, he's got the Wendigo, he's got a December Acolyte, and he's got 2 Ice Gammon. So looking at those 2 crews and trying to guess what strategies, or sorry, what schemes they're going to go for, I reckon Mark for Death is probably a pretty good one. That Raspy crew is pretty killy and not all that fast, so I really don't think that Covert Breakthrough or Leave Your Mark would be involved. Same with the Ironsides crew. It's pretty elite, pretty killy. I think it's going to try and unmark stuff for death. Again, not that fast, with the exception of the Firestarter, who's not bad. So I really, again, don't think Covert Breakthrough or Leave Your Mark are options for either of them. Same with Comic Labor. So with that process of elimination, it means that I reckon both of them are also going to take prisoner, which can definitely be a tricky one in this one. The Raspy player and I aren't really trying to kill anyone over the loot marker, although if he's taking Mark for Death, he certainly could start doing that. And then I really have no idea what strategy the wild card, the Ironsides player, could be trying to do. But anyway, so moving on to deployment, the Raspy player won the flip and decided to deploy in the top right-hand corner and sets up like so, just keeping everything tight together in cover. Ironsides player, he got a pick of either the top left or the bottom right corner. He went the top left and set up behind the forest here. So none of his crew really is in line of sight of the Raspy crew in case she starts to blast away on them. And then I'm set up all the way down here on the bottom left, which I'm more than happy about. You notice that the Emberling and the Tengu are kind of placed behind that impassable terrain because they're not really worried about it. And the rest of my crew can just kind of swing around. We'll be tightly funneled going through the impassable terrain and the hazardous terrain there. So if Raspy gets a good line of sight, she can certainly lay down the hurt with blasts. But with May, I'm really not too worried about that. If I keep everything in that nice 4-inch vent steam bubble to keep her at negatives, then I'm more than happy for her to waste AP trying to shoot me up. So turn 1. Normally, in a regular Malifaux game, turn 1s are fairly uneventful. You're just kind of jockeying into position and looking for setup for turn 2, but it kicked off right away between Ironsides and Rasputina. So Johanna saunters up and hunkers down behind that fence up there, and the Wendigo just comes out guns blazing and tries to blast her away. Unfortunately, is foiled by that soft cover. The gunsmith goes ahead and tries to take a couple shots off, couple wounds off Rasputina after she moved up and blasted onto him. The Firestarter, he jumps his way into the woods. He went reckless and really put a stack of, I think, about 3 or 4 burning on the Wendigo and another couple burning on Rasputina. Unfortunately, Rasputina, she kind of Armor of Decembered up a couple times. So she's sitting at around armor 2 right now. So even though she's taken a couple hits, it's really only be doing 1 damage at a time. But she's slowly starting to get pegged down a little bit. And everything else is just kind of moving up and staying within that soft cover. So trying to neuter Rasputina's effectiveness just a little bit. Down below here, I kind of just move up in this little ball. Again, that 4-inch radius or of Maze Vent Steam, just to keep everything at negatives. She did it twice, so everything trying to shoot or cast at her or anything within that green circle is going to be at double negatives. The only thing that's not is the Emberling, who went and ghosted through that impassable terrain, and he's just going to hang out up there. There's a gunsmith who can try and take some pot shots at him, but I'm really not too worried about that. The 2 ski markers you can see there, they're not really counting for anything. When you have the option to drop them, I do, particularly when there are Tengus in the crew. Sensei Yu had a focus left over, so he dropped a ski marker, and the Tengu, he had some AP left over because he got a push from Sensei Yu, so he just dropped a ski marker, and that's actually going to be really valuable, and you'll see why that is in the next turn. So here's just another look from my crew's point of view of what we can see. The only other thing to note is the Ice Golem. He's kind of coming toward me a little bit. I'm not too worried about that. I mean, that thing's only defense 2. So May shouldn't have too many problems chewing through him, and then when he explodes, she'll take a couple damage, but with a 7 stone pool, I'm not too worried about that for preventions and stuff like that. But he did throw a little Ice Gammon down this way. So now I'm thinking maybe, he did take Convict Labor or maybe Breakthrough or Leave Your Mark or something like that, as he could throw the Ice Gammon into my deployment zone or across that halfway mark to start dropping ski markers, which could be good. Here is another shot of the Ironsides crew. The forest there is doing a really good job of actually blocking some of my camera shots. So here's just another angle where you can see where they are and what they're up to. And then there's the Raspy crew. So the end of turn 1, it is 0 points all around. So start of turn 2, I'll go through the Ironsides player turn first. Up the top there, we've got that red X. What happened was Johanna popped her imbued energies. She jumped over that wall, marked the Wendigo for death, and then smacked him with a hammer. So that was the end of him. Firestarter jumped out of the forest and is just hiding next to the big boulder and is trying to put the hurt on Rasputina, setting her on fire a little bit again. Same with the gunsmith. They're both just chipping away at Rasputina, which kind of leads me to believe that he's got the wildcard has the strategy where he gets 2 victory points for every any master that he kills by the end of the game. And then we got Ironsides, who makes a big break for it. So she runs out of the forest and comes straight down toward me and charges the rail worker there. She can't really do anything. She punches and he bobs and weaves and remains totally unscathed. But she's right up in my crew's grill right now. The Raspy player, seeing the death of his poor Wendigo, he goes ahead and he marks Johanna for death using Rasputina, who was also engaged with a giant hammer. Raspy then goes ahead and uses her 0 action, 1,000 cuts. And I've never seen this used before, but it just keeps going and going and going. The Raspy player just keeps hitting the mass trigger to take it again, and manages to just peg 5 wounds off Rasputina. So she's marked for death. She gets hit by that a couple times, and then Rasputina uses her December armor ability to push out of combat and grab a couple armor. The Ice Golem and the Ice Gammon, they run up, and the Ice Golem at this point, he pops his imbued energies, has to move and then charge. But even with his 2 attacks and his melee expert, and the Ice Gammon, can't do any wounds can't kill Johanna. Takes her down to a hard to kill, but she's still hanging in there. And then it's just another shot there to see how they're all lined up. And then there was me. So I'll start over and explain what happened with the Tengu here. So Sensei Yu, who really doesn't move from that spot for a lot of the rest of the game, he goes ahead and focuses, doesn't use the focus, but just holds onto it and casts Mighty Gust on the Tengu. So the Tengu picks up the ski marker that he dropped in the first turn, gets pushed his 5 inches, and then throws that ski marker 3 inches away, and also gets fast. So then, when the Tengu activates, he jumps to a ski marker within 5 inches and is able to place to that other side of that ski marker. So he essentially gets his 4 inches of free movement, and then using a walk action, he moves over to further than 6 inches away from the center line, drops ski marker, which I will pick up for leave your mark at the end of the turn, and then goes ahead and casts regen onto Mei Feng, who has ended up over here. So what she does is she activates, she uses a 0 action to push the rail worker to where you can see him. Before she activated, though, the Emberling had moved down and placed a scrap marker using the cooldown ability. So she started off next to Sensei Yu where that green circle is, and then proceeds to rail walk all the way over to the rail worker, which she charges the December Acolyte. And of course she had used her recall training at this point as well, so I didn't have to cheat in anything to get that rail work to get the rail walk to go off, and then she just punches that poor guy down to the ground. So yeah, that's how explosively aggressive Mei Feng can be. Not even a problem. I should say at this point as well that I was pretty fortunate in the first 2 turns with regard to hand draw. At this point, I had the Black Joker and 5 Severes in my hand, so I was very comfortable throwing Mei in there, knowing that December Acolyte could and would die. And now I've pretty much got that right flank secured. So my Tengu is just going to hang out there and hopefully score me the 3 points for leave your mark, which is really why I needed to kill that December Acolyte. So at the end of the turn, it is 1 for 10 Thunders, 1 for Ironsides, and 0 for Rasputina. So then we come to turn 3. We'll start off with the, if you look here at the top of the image, we've got that red X, which is where Johanna used to be. So she got punched in the face by that Ice Golem, who then turned his attention down here to the Fire Starter. Before Rasputina could get away, the Gunsmith activated and just pumped shots into her. And unfortunately, the Rasputina player hadn't got any armor up on her right now, so she took the full brunt of the force, was totally out of soul stones at this point, and she bit the dust. So at this point, I'm fairly confident that the Ironsides player is trying to kill enemy masters, which I'm not too worried about because Mei is kind of sitting pretty all the way over on the right-hand side of the board there. The other significant thing to note here is that the Ice Gammon, he ran down and marked the Fire Starter for death as well. So I know that both the Arcanist players have marked for death at this point. The other thing that the Raspu player managed to do, though, was his Ice Gammon over on the right-hand side that was engaged with Mei goes ahead and marks Mei for death as well, because I think he's figured out that Ironsides is trying to kill Mei. And it doesn't matter who kills the model that's marked for death, it's the model that marks the other model for death, which scores his victory points, as I understand it. So if the Ice Gammon marks Mei for death and the Ironsides player kills Mei, then it's the Raspu player who gets the point. So he marks her for death and then runs away. Mei, of course, fails her disengaging strike against him. And Ice Gammon runs over to be within a few inches of that ski marker that Tengu places, which means I can't remove that for leave your mark. So that was kind of annoying. So I sent May over there. She charged in, beat him up a couple times, had an AP to spare, so she vented steam, and then with her free push, pushed back out to where you can see. And she is within 6 inches of that rail worker who's just gone defensive. So she can pop back into the thick of things fairly quickly. What's going on with the whole Ironsides thing down here is that the Emberling has activated and moves to the other edge of Ironsides' engagement range. And he uses his cooldown ability again to drop another scrap marker, which Ironsides is standing on top of, so you can't really see it. Ironsides is not too happy about this. She walks up, marks the Emberling for death, and tries to punch him a couple times, but fails. Fails hard. So the Emberling has survived Ironsides' onslaught. Now the thing about that scrap marker that you see Ironsides standing on top of is that if May rail walks to that point, she can position herself in such a way that she's in base contact with the rail marker and the loop marker. So essentially saving myself an AP there. The Kamainu got mighty gusted by Sensei Yu, moved up and took a couple bites out of that gunsmith who had moved in to also try and kill the Emberling, but also failed. So that is one hardcore Emberling there. This is another shot from this side of the table so you can get a better picture of that fire starter staring down that ice golem. That's a bad place to be if you're a fire starter. And at the end of the turn, I will score again for leave your mark, and fortunately have denied the Ironsides player the mark for death, so he's still sitting on 1 point. I'm on 2, and the Raspy player is on 1 point from that dead Johanna. So we go to turn 4, and we'll start off with our Raspy player. So the Rasputina player, he went ahead and activated his Ice Golem, who used all of his AP to finally put that fire starter in the ground. However, the fire starter managed to activate before that, and with his last final act of desperation, he marks the Ice Gammon for death. But he is eventually pummeled into the ground. Now, in retribution for this, the Ironsides player activates his Gunsmith, who targets the marked for death Ice Gammon and blows him away, scoring him 1 victory point for mark for death and damaging the Ice Golem in the process. So if you look at the center of the screen, a lot of other stuff has gone down. So Ironsides eventually manages to punch out that Emberling, and then moves around and takes another couple punches at that Kumainu. The red X, which is representing the Gunsmith turns around and manages to finish off the Kumainu. So that's where those 2 green X's are coming from, a dead Kumainu and a dead Emberling. Not wanting Ironsides to get away, the rail worker, he's going to move over to engage Ironsides. But at this point, Ironsides is more than 2 inches away from the loop marker, which means I can take that interact action to pick it up. So before that rail worker had moved, May jumps in, bounces to him, bounces to the scrap marker that the Emberling had left, and then Jackhammer kicks the hurt Gunsmith, who is on her final wound from the Kumainu. And then May picks up the loop marker. So the end of the turn 4, I will score again for leave your mark, as that Tengu over there is just dropping ski markers. Ironsides will be at 3 victory points because of the 2 mark for death casualties it got this turn, and Rasputina will be at 2 victory points with mark for death as well. So at this point, I still have not figured out what my opponent's second schemes are. So I'm still thinking it's got to be take prisoner because they don't really seem to be doing anything else. So I'm a little bit worried that something's just going to swoop in at the final turn and pick on one of my guys like that rail worker or May. So we go into turn 5. We'll start with the Raspy player who activates his Ice Golem and runs in, sucker punches that Gunsmith and takes him out. Ironsides does a little cheeky trick here. So I had built this little railroad leading back to my deployment zone. However, on rereading the strategy, it turns out that if the model who is holding a loot marker moves in any way other than a walk, they have to drop the loot marker. So there goes that plan of rail walking back into my deployment zone. But May is not engaged, and even if she was, she's got her leap aside trigger, although that would make her drop the loot marker. But she can try and run back to the deployment zone if needs be. Or even if she's just holding on to the marker, it's still 3 victory points, so it's not a big deal. But Ironsides goes ahead and uses her ability where she makes an enemy model push towards her. So she uses that on May, and I just cannot cheat high enough to deny it, and May ends up dropping that ski marker, or the loot marker. Ironsides then follows up with a couple punches, and does a few damage to May, but May was completely unharmed thanks to the Tengu casting regen on her. So she'll survive. So then I've got a choice. Do I try and push Ironsides off that loot marker and then pick it up with May? Or do I kind of cut my losses and just bum rush Ironsides? Because at this point, I will reveal that I have take prisoner on Ironsides. So at this point, we were running short on time, so I just decided to bum rush Ironsides and score take prisoner. So as it turns out, the 2 Arcanist players both had Covert Breakthrough as their second scheme. I'm not really sure what the thinking was behind that, but they kind of, once they started engaging each other and taking each other down a little bit, and me kind of spreading out to cover the entire of the bottom side of the board, they figured they weren't going to do it and just put all their resources into kind of beating up each other and not really scoring a lot of victory points. Although, well, I guess scoring a few in the process with Mark for Death. But at the end of the game, I'll score 3 victory points for Take Prisoner on Ironsides, and 3 for Leave Your Mark. Ironsides will score 2 victory points for killing Raspy and 3 victory points for Mark for Death, and Raspy will score 2 victory points for Mark for Death. So with that, it is a victory to Mayfang and the 10 Thunders. Some sneaky Arcanist on sneaky Arcanist brawl ended up with a win to the infiltrating 10 Thunders. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Bye.